Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. Oh, sorry, I'm doing interesting things to the slides. We're going to get started because it's 4 o'clock. We're all that stands between you and the happy hour. So thank you for joining us for the last panel of what has been, for me anyway, I don't know about for you, a very, very full day. I'm Andrew Iliff. I'm the Director of National Networks at HEET. We're a Boston-based climate nonprofit that works on expanding geothermal networks around the country and, if we have time to discuss, increasingly around the world. I have the good fortune this afternoon to moderate an incredibly stacked panel. Our panelists are going to share their experiences and strategies for building the drilling workforce, and doing so making use of the IRA tax credits that are intended to scale up the geothermal industry to meet the rapidly growing demand that we've been talking about all day. None of what we talk about at this conference happens without a capable and skilled drilling workforce. But building this workforce is not going to happen on its own. We have to build new skill sets. We need to build on-ramps for broader participation in this workforce for folks that didn't grow up in drilling, including people from marginalized communities. And we need to ensure that drillers and everyone who works on geothermal projects earns a family-sustaining wage. These are the challenges that everyone on this stage is hard at work trying to solve. So let's get to it. Let's hear from these great speakers. I'll briefly introduce everyone, and then we'll have short presentations from each of them, and hope to leave lots of time for discussions between the panelists and questions from the audience. So first up, we'll have Emily Engman, who is a senior associate in the Energy Credits and Incentives Division at Eide in Washington, D.C. Emily's going to share some of the technical details of the IRA prevailing wage and apprenticeship tax credits. Brock Yordy leads the Developed Well Group and is co-founder of the Geothermal Drillers Association and has been leveraging his experience in training geothermal drillers around the country. Brock is, amongst other things, going to describe his experience leading a pilot driller tutorial in collaboration with HEET. Gregg Strede is the Director of Training and Fund Administrator for International Union of Operating Engineers Local 478 in Connecticut, and is building a geothermal driller registered apprenticeship program. And finally, we'll have Ryan Dougherty, who is President of the GeoExchange organization and has been a key member of the Geothermal Market Capacity Coalition that includes other folks in this room and at this conference. And Ryan is going to present on building a regional drilling center of excellence. But first up, we'll have Emily. Thanks very much.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. And I'm Emily Engman. I'm a senior associate at Eide, a public accounting firm, and very excited to talk today about the Inflation Reduction Act and then specifically prevailing wage and how that applies. So first, I wanted to take, a quick step back and look at the overall climate economy. There's this growing movement towards green energy and sustainable solutions, with the passage of the CHIPS Act, the IIJA, and specifically the Inflation Reduction Act. And the Inflation Reduction Act really looks at transportation, advanced manufacturing, and renewable and clean energy. And so this slide is a lot of credits up here, but today we're mainly going to be looking at Section 48, which is specific to geothermal, and then discussing prevailing wage as well. One of the other important sections of the Inflation Reduction Act and how it really applies to more participants to these credits are also Sections 6417 for direct pay. And so under the Inflation Reduction Act, nonprofits, state and local governments are also able to participate in these credits. And so it's really made it an exciting landscape so that they're able to affordably install these renewable sources. And then also Section 6417, transferability. And so typically in the past, you would see like flip equity structures, and under 6418, you're able to sell the credit if you're not able to offset it against tax liabilities. And so Section 48, where geothermal lies, there's quite a few other energy producing properties that also fall under this section, but this is specific to geothermal. And so in 2025, things shift a little bit towards Section 48E. That's solely specific to items producing clean electricity. And so for the main part, geothermal stays under Section 48. But if it's geothermal that is producing electricity, it will fall under Section 48E. And there's just a little bit more requirements: producing clean electricity and greenhouse gas emissions rate of less than 0. So kind of the more exciting part, the math part, how do we figure out the credit amount? How do we figure out what you're going to be able to get back? And so 2 important parts that go into this credit calculation. One is figuring out that credit percentage. And so everyone starts at that 6%. In order to get to that 30%, you do need to meet prevailing wage requirements, or there's 2 other exceptions to that. I will go into that a bit further, but let me just talk about the rest of the calculation currently. So once we get to that 30%, there are also other bonus adders that we can also increase the credit. The Inflation Reduction Act, they're not just promoting renewable clean energy, they're also promoting domestically sourced products. So they're adding another 10% if you're sourcing domestically. And then if you're in an energy community, there's an adder of 10% as well. So coal mine closures, adjacent to coal mine closures, anyone kind of affected by the move towards greener energy, they're trying to give them an extra incentive to bring renewable energy to those communities. And then also the environmental justice allocation, specific to wind and solar in 2024, but I just wanted to mention it. And it does also apply to producing clean electricity in 2025, but that's also an extra 10 to 20% bonus adder. And so really for geothermal, you're kind of looking at a credit around 30 or 6%, but if we're meeting prevailing wage or one of the exceptions, 30 to 50%. So you can really get a big chunk of the investment back through these tax credits. And then also, the other important part of the calculation is figuring out the basis, what you're going to multiply that credit percentage by, and that's the unit, figuring out the unit of property. So for geothermal, we're pulling in the wells, heat pumps, piping, ductwork, any more soft costs, indirect costs, design costs, we're able to pull into the basis as well. And then I also just wanted to add in, there are some basis considerations if you're using tax-exempt bonds or federal grants as well, so specific things that you would need to consider if those apply to you. But that's how we really come up with the calculation. You're coming up with that percentage, the 6 to 50%, and then figuring out the basis and what you can all pull into come up with your credit amount. Now, I want to dive further into prevailing wage because that's a lot of the reason that we're here today. So prevailing wage is defined by Davis-Bacon. There are specific rules. There's not the the reporting requirements aligned with Davis-Bacon, but it is defined by Davis-Bacon. Wage rates are determined by the Department of Labor, and also the risk maintains with the taxpayer, so who's ever filing that they must meet prevailing wage. Going back to the 2 exceptions, so there are 2 exceptions on whether you need to meet prevailing wage or not, and it's whether you're greater than 1 megawatt, or there's a beginning of construction exception as well, and so that is if you started construction prior to 1/29/2023, you would not need to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship rules. I also wanted to highlight that for prevailing wage, a lot of it is figuring out your worker classification, and so dependent on the type of construction you're doing, there's 4 different types of construction: heavy, highway, building, and residential as well. And so figuring out where you fall, figuring out your wages with SAM.gov, and then making sure that you're paying your workers the prevailing wages outlined. And also there are very strict penalties when it comes to this, and so it's something that we're really watching closely. The penalty deadline is for the end of every quarter. You have 30 days after to pay any discrepancies. And so for the end of the quarter in September, you have up until October 30th to, if you weren't paying prevailing wage to some employees, you need to correct it by then because there are steep penalties of $5,000 per employee. And then also for repairs on the building for the next 5 years, you also do need to meet prevailing wage for the next 5 years. And then the apprenticeship requirement, which I think is where a lot more people are getting stumped up on. There's the participation requirement, and so if you have 4 or more laborers, you will need to hire an apprentice. There's the labor hours requirement, and so you need to meet, in 2024, 15% of your labor hours do need to be covered by an apprentice, and then the ratio requirement, so just the apprentice to journeyman ratio as well. There are specific ways that if apprentices aren't available to you, and we have seen that you do not need to meet this requirement, and so that's what they call the good faith effort. And so with that, you're able to, reach out to your local state or Department of Labor, see if there's any apprentices available. If you're either denied or they have a failure to respond within 5 business days, you're in the process of documenting the good faith effort, and then under this, you will not need to meet the apprenticeship requirement. There's a few specific details that go into how you're requesting it. You need to make sure that you're requesting it at least 45 days in advance prior to when you would need these apprentices, so there is a timeline that's necessary to follow. And then being denied or no response within 5 days. And then I would also say for the good faith effort, this only will continue for 365 days. So say this is a project that lasts over 3 years, you will need to requalify for good faith effort every 365 days, so every year. So that's something important to look out for, because if you're not, if you don't have those apprentices, there is the penalties that align with it, and they can be steep for intentional disregard as well. And so with that, I will pass it along. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is probably one of our most important panels to have here. And so I'm going to distract everybody else that's out there and say, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. All kinds of free money. Hey, look, people are coming in. Workforce. The drilling industry is a tribal, self-taught industry. Though we have lots of science and fundamentals. We've seen from the U.S. military's drilling programs to apprenticeship programs in Chicago with the 150, the importance of what we can do. But as I've worked in this industry as a knowledge sharer, 3rd-generation driller, developed the U.S. military's program in Indianapolis and in Nellis Air Force Base, so the Army and the Air Force. There's one thing that we don't realize, and I have it up on the board here, but 8.25 million people, Americans, work in the construction industry. How many people work every day in the United States? 162 million. So as we start looking at this industry, that looks a lot like my grandfather's industry has been, and we're looking at changing the culture and the development of this industry. 1 in 5 construction workers are over the age of 55. 1 in 4 drillers is over the age of 58. So we're losing knowledge. And as we look at the separation from our housing market decline and where construction used to be in employment, in the 11 million range, now these 20 to 24-year-olds, mom and dad left the construction industry in many places because the work stopped and they struggled and they watched their houses. So we have an identity crisis here. And as we look at a very strong 14% workforce right now, there's only about 15,000 drillers as we look at this and we talk with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this whole idea of they just don't want to work or we can't find them, we have to inspire them. And now we're competing, and I love getting that brown box on my door in a day for 2 days, but those warehouses pop up all over the place right now. And they compete with us with the weather and extreme weather, right? 40 hours reliable and climate controlled at $28 an hour and starting. So from a prevailing wage standpoint and, the signatories, the unions, like that's what's building our construction industry back. And we're hiring 35,000 new Americans into the construction industry every month since June. So we have the promise. Now it's, how do we get into drilling? How do we get them there? How do we inspire them? And so with great luck, and I'm insanely honored, IGSPA with HEET's drive, we did a pilot drilling tutorial. And why did we call it a tutorial? Because we were bringing in brand new individuals to the industry that in 80 hours, we needed to get them comfortable on being on the job site, understanding their roles and responsibilities. We always have that concept that, oh, I got to work on my soft skills, and it's like, we need to work on our human skills. And so if we're going to bring these new people in, first thing they need is the roles and responsibilities and work safe. Because in the construction industry right now, about 1 out of 3 on a job site feel unsafe at a given point because we have high-risk environments. There's lots going on. So the goal was to bring in these 7 students and have a big discussion about how can I operate safely and see a career. And moving beyond these 7 students graduated, we have to think about the milestones, the career expectations for these candidates. Is it a safe place to work? Physically, mentally, financially? Is it a company that has the proper onboarding and training plan? If we do an 80-hour tutorial, where do they go from there? What does the safety program look like? And getting to work with the 150, and we're going to have Greg Strede up here in a moment. And the construction industry, 80% of injuries are an unsafe act versus 20% unsafe conditions. So operating safely and mitigating risk for what we want to do in an industry that has a machine that is rotating, crushing, smashing, all these things happening so we can put boreholes in the ground is very important. And the collaboration that we need in training here on the rural geothermal drillers that are going to be in farming areas and whatnot to our big urban projects, we got to find them all. And then it's going to come to, what milestones do we have? What is the expectation of leadership? Where is the engagement? Drilling companies, I didn't have a choice. I went into the Yordy and Son well drilling because I was a son. And we have hired in this industry through nepotism or the neighbor, or it used to be the farm kids. And now we don't have that pipeline. There's lots more going on with as easy it is to jump on the internet and see that. Or when I'm traveling and my wife's back here, publisher of The Driller, when I'm traveling and it's snowing, I can Venmo the neighbor kid to shovel our walk, right? So entrepreneurialism is there, but there's a heck of a lot of options out there. And so how do we drive them back into geothermal and green jobs? Drilling companies. I got many texts, and I know there's few drilling companies in here right now in this room. Free cars, everybody, free beer. Let's get in here. John's gonna love that on the video. The 80-hour tutorial was to prime these students to go and be successful. It wasn't to train a driller in 80 hours and put them on a platform. That's silly. We needed to start them in a place that they could operate, understand their roles and responsibilities, understand the terminology, and be productive. And so as we get drilling companies that have buy-in to this, it's got to be full company buy-in, because the industry is going to change. It's going to look different than it has, and we have to be okay and comfortable with it. Company core values. It's important what the culture looks like. What is the vision for the company? What are the roles and responsibilities? We have knowledge sharers, we have knowledge brokers, and we have knowledge keepers. And if my entire team is full of knowledge keepers, how do I get that next team to step up on the drill platform? Because in reality, if I want Yordy and Son well drilling to be successful, I need to step off the platform and step completely away from it in order to be able to be a productive company and grow this industry. And so it's very much, what are my visions? What is my roles and responsibilities for these new hires? And then onboarding, a tutorial, again, not being a knowledge keeper, but a sharer and moving on. We have to have good standard operating procedures that we're looking at. And we have great IGSPA accreditation, and we have all of this, but we have a drilling aspect that we're discovering the unknown together. And so what are the SOPs to how we're going to operate for this business that built this business, that's put all the $1 million worth of equipment in there? And then who's our coach and mentors that's going to take these new individuals on and embrace it? And that's back into company buy-in. And then, damn it, safety program. If you look at the cost of just an amputation at $60,000 direct cost, you probably have another 60 grand easily in indirect. $120,000 for that bad mistake. What is that cost recovery for us bringing in new hires and being able to have that family sustaining wage if we have that type of risk? And so safety is very important, and I commend all the union individuals I've gotten to work with across this country, because there is a solid core safety program there and acceptance that it will be that way. And so again, standard operating procedures and safety program, along with company buy-in, is how this will work. And Gregg Strede, great guy. I'm excited to have him up here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gregg Strede. I'm the training director for Local 478 in Connecticut. We are a apprenticeship training and skills improvement fund. We represent the union's commitment to lifelong learning and superior training in both operation and repair of heavy equipment, heavy construction equipment. We have over 3,000 members in Connecticut. We have over 400,000 across all of North America. We currently have 100 apprentices in our training program as of today that are 100% employed. Local 478 is proud to provide a high-skilled workforce in the state of Connecticut for over 113 years. Our commitment to the education, health, and safety and the membership has established our reputation as a premier organization with the willingness to adapt to the ever-changing technologies in our industry. What we have to offer, learning opportunities both on the job and supervised in the classroom. We enhance our skill improvement, so even after you're out of our apprenticeship program, we have a skill improvement side, which enhances skills and knowledge to meet and exceed the challenges of Connecticut's workforce. We have many pathways and partnerships for trade-related licenses and certifications. So we do from state of Connecticut crane licenses to a nationally OSHA-recognized OECP crane certification program. We're partners with Lincoln Electric, the Lincoln Electric Educational Partnership. We do NC3 certifications. We're also, and I'll get further into this as I get further into my speech, but we are a training provider for federal motor carriers. A couple of our corporate partners, Topcon, Trimble, and all of the major players in Caterpillar, John Deere, Manitowoc, Komatsu, Volvo. You know, we're corporate sponsors with them and all their training programs too. We have a staff at the school, and we only cover Connecticut. We have a staff of the school at the school of over 35 full and part-time instructors. They all have licenses and certifications in what they teach. So in our health and safety department, we offer an OSHA 10 and OSHA 30. We do, in Connecticut, we do the OSHA 10 every 5 years, so they come back for every 5 years. We do MSHA new minor training, hazmat 40 hours with a 8-hour refresher every year. It's one of our biggest classes. Our Saturday programs at our school, sometimes we have over 150 people just doing recertifications and that type of stuff at our school. We do a full asbestos supervisor and refresher too. For machine operations, like I touched base a little bit before with Trimble and TopCon, so with the introduction of grade control systems, we do it all now. They partnered with us at our Texas facility, and we do grade control systems from GNSS all the way down to robotic total stations. We have a drone program for drones doing aerial survey. So we adapt to whatever it takes to train our members to make sure that they are competitive in the workforce and also that our contractors are competitive. With our machine operations, with earth moving, we do dozer, excavator, loader, grader, you name it in earth moving, we train for it. We have evaluations to go along with all of that training. With cranes, we do both state of Connecticut crane licensing and a nationally recognized OECP crane license. So our members are well-rounded when they leave our apprenticeship program and our skill improvement side. So for our endorsements, we do tower crane, luffer, lattice boom, hydraulic, telescopic boom cranes. So we have one of everything at our facility. Our equipment fleet is 8 cranes and over 30 pieces of earth-moving equipment. Our CDL program, like I mentioned before, we're registered with the Federal Motor Carriers Safety Administration as a training provider and a training location. So we have a staff, we do the testing on site. We do over 100 CDLs a year. We usually start them off with a Class B, work them up into a Class A license, but we do it all. We have eight trucks in our fleet just for doing that training. Well, and also we have skill improvement side of that training too afterwards. They learn how to load equipment, unload equipment, and haul a load. We have a full heavy-duty mechanics portion. So the mechanics, hydraulics, diesel engine, electrical systems, gas systems, mobile air conditioning, and like I mentioned before, we are partners with Lincoln Electric in an NC3 certification program. What our mechanics job opportunities for them, we cover all shops and quarries, not all shops and quarries, but shops and quarries in Connecticut, O&G Industries, Tilcon, Connecticut, Suzio, York Hill, Trap Rock, Glosso Materials, and then a lot of the equipment manufacturers, H.O. Penn Caterpillar, W.R. Clark, John Deere, Komatsu, and Volvo, Tyler Equipment with Volvo. So they have, we supply a lot of mechanics to our industry too. For natural gas operation qualifications, so we provide the employees to go out to service Eversource's gas infrastructure in Connecticut. We are members of EnergyWorld.net, so we do EWN OQs and also NGA Northeast Gas OQ program too. So in the state of Connecticut, we have registered apprenticeship programs. We have a heavy equipment operators program, which is a 4-year, 6,000-hour program. The heavy equipment mechanics program is a 4-year, 8,000-hour program. And then we have a crane operator, which they're crane operators only, which would be a 3-year, 6,000-hour program. And recently we added the geothermal and well drilling operator program to our heavy equipment operators apprenticeship program. So this course includes, I broke it down into stages, because it's time and competency-based training for our apprentices or apprentices that already exist in our 4-year program. So stage 1, the safety portion of it, it's what they need to get onto the job site. So that would be the OSHA 10s, OSHA 30s, the CDL, so that's entry-level driver training. They go through that to start to aim for their Class B CDLs. 40-hour hazmat, so if they get on the job and there's the possibility of hazardous materials, they're able to go in for drilling for hazardous materials or through that or the excavation portion of it. Then drilling fundamentals, which mirrors a program like Brock mentioned, which was a Chicago Local 150 program. And basic equipment skills, which covers like skid steers, excavators, loaders, whatever they're going to need to do to be productive on the job site. Stage 2 will be geothermal and other well types. They'll learn how to drill those wells, and then soil exploration and geology. Hazmat recertification 1, so every year they have to come back for an 8-hour refresher, so they'll be doing that as they work through that program. And then we call it basic grade, which is the use of grade instruments and how to read plans. Stage 3 would be equipment skills 2, which again, every time they step up, they have to do evaluations to move on to the next step. Hazmat recertification, rigging and signal training, and possibly introducing them to cranes and some type of crane activities. Stage 4 would be mechanical systems and skills, equipment skills 2, hazmat recertification 3, and then we'd be aiming for them to go for the state of Connecticut well drilling, the completion of that license. That's what I am working through right now with Department of Consumer Protection to narrow that down on the occupational licensing portion of this. So this is already approved in the state of Connecticut as a geothermal well drilling operator program. And the Local 478, we're committed to build and maintain a diverse workforce that supports the economic growth and stability of our employers, the union, and our communities. And here's my contact information. So thank you. Open any questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Dougherty with GeoExchange, and I have the honor of talking today about a national network of geothermal drilling centers of excellence. So we heard from Emily about the Inflation Reduction Act and PWA, which is a common refrain, prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. We heard from Brock about drilling training, the workforce of the future, and we heard from Gregg about the great certifications that they offer and the role that labor is going to have to play in the future growth of this industry. So how do we bring it all together? Well, it just so happens that about a year and a half ago at a NY-GEO conference in Albany, I was pulled into a room very urgently because I had made an offhanded comment during a session about a funding opportunity that had been issued through the Department of Energy for the Defense Production Act, and it was to spur manufacturing of heat pumps. And we thought, well, let's put together a proposal because we manufacture, yes, we're not talking about heat pumps per se, but you have to have a loop, and it has to go in the ground for the heat pump to work. So you're really kind of manufacturing something on site. And we scrambled. We had 2 or 3 weeks, and we were meeting every couple days. It was this awesome strike force that came together to submit what I thought was a great proposal, which was ultimately unsuccessful. DOE said, no, we want you to make boxes. And then the second round of funding came out, and we refined the approach. We said this is too good to let it go, and we really refined this approach to say, we are manufacturing right there in the ground. And they said, no, we really want boxes. But the collaboration around this idea, this concept of a center of excellence was so profound and so compelling that we are not going to give up. And we are going to build a geothermal drilling center of excellence sometime in the near future, because this group is all very, very committed to it. What's the value proposition? I don't need to really go into this with you. You all know the benefits of geothermal heating and cooling systems, especially at scale, especially thermal energy networks, or whether they're utility or community-owned. We've heard so many great speakers extol the virtues of these systems. They can be profound and really life-changing in a lot of ways if they're properly deployed and deployed at scale. So here's the approach. What is the Drilling Center of Excellence? What does it seek to accomplish? Well, it's sort of a one-stop shop for all of your drilling needs, from the very beginnings of someone's journey into the industry to develop themselves and their career, to provide for themselves and their family, to be very successful in their field. So these centers at their core are training and certification, educational facilities, but they're also sort of a place for capacity to be rapidly deployed into the market where it's needed. One of the problems with getting geothermal, especially larger scale geothermal systems deployed, is that you've got to mobilize a workforce, a team, and often there are time and capacity constraints. We hope that there's an instance where not only are there skilled technicians located at these centers and apprentices that are learning the ropes, but there will also be equipment that can quickly be deployed as needed into the market. More than that, we would really like to see these centers become manufacturing sites where drill rigs are actually being constructed. And it was a drill rig manufacturer who was really at the center of our initial proposal to the Department of Energy. And right now, they manufacture their rigs overseas. But they said, if we can pull this off and we can get federal funding, which are matching funds, to help us build a facility in the United States, we will do that. And we know that there's growing interest in many manufacturers who are currently constructing their rigs overseas at building here in the United States. The intended assets, I just kind of went into this. So, there will be on-site physical assets in the form of workspace and labs, field test sites, and drill rigs themselves. We will have to have the staff and the team to manage these operations and ensure that there is ample resources available. We also, and I failed to mention this, I should have said it right up front, we want to act as a center of financial leverage and a place to sort of grease the skids, so to speak, in terms of getting those projects across the finish line. If there is some impediment financially to their deployment, there's the opportunity for these COEs to be a financial resource as well, and then certainly to act as a center point and a clearinghouse for networking and bridge building. Who does this affect? Who is this center of excellence for? It's for all of these stakeholder groups. These are the key gatekeepers in a lot of ways to the transition, our once-in-a-century clean energy transition. And the Center of Excellence is really intended to engage with and meet the needs of these key stakeholder groups. So, things are underway already. We're beginning to roll this out. I was called the guinea pig last week because I'm the first to present this deck. Jeff Howard at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection just sent a bunch of edits like an hour ago, so we're going to make those on the next iteration. But we're getting moving. There are a number of funding streams that we're actively pursuing. And really what I view as one of the first key activities to make the Center of Excellence a reality is something that Brock talked about, which is the program that he executed in partnership, funded with HEET, with participation from IGSPA. That sort of pilot, I think, represents the future of this industry and what is going to be at the core of the Center of Excellence. On this slide, you can see some of the goals that we're seeking to achieve. This is really all about scaling. How do we scale if we don't have this capacity? And certainly the Northeast, I believe, will be the epicenter of this activity. In order to comply with CLCPA, and I know there's people getting a little wishy-washy about the ability to hit the law. I've heard nothing today but dogged determination to actually see the mandates through. And I think if we work together in a unified fashion, we can get to where we need to be, which is a significant increase, including the creation of many jobs in this industry that pay living wages. So we talked about the pilot that was completed, optimization and standardization of drilling, workforce training. There are a number of other pilots in the works. We would like, if we do get funding, we would like to hire an executive director. We're going to need dedicated staff to handle and to really oversee the work that will be done at the Geothermal Center of Excellence. And a plan like this is only as successful as the partnerships that you build within the community that you're going to engage with and serve. I was in this room for the last panel on how we build a geothermal market that is fully inclusive. And it was very inspiring, and I think that that engagement has to be at the core of the work that is being done to expand our industry's capacity. What do we get out of it? You already all know the benefits. We're going to flatten curves. We're going to improve indoor air quality. We're going to lower people's electric bills. Not even if you have a geothermal heat pump in your home, is your electric bill lowered. Your neighbor's geothermal heat pump lowers your electric bill. To speak nothing of the emissions reduction impacts and the grid resiliency. This is a graphic of the current participants in the GMCC. I would welcome other organizations, municipalities, maybe in Connecticut, maybe New Haven. We can get New Haven on here as well. Come join us. We want to work with you. We meet once a month. We've got a lot of great activity in the pipeline already, and we need to increase membership and collaboration around this great idea. So I know we've got time for some questions. I'll leave it there, and happy to take any questions from the audience. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We have about 15 minutes by my watch for questions. And we have Chris with the microphone. Nobody? There we go.
Hi there, Sarah Ross from Undaunted K-12. Great presentation, very inspiring. My question is about what states can do to help support all this important workforce development. What do you look to states for? Like, Gregg, are you getting any state support? What are the things that states can either do to hinder this work or to really support a robust development of the geothermal workforce?
Well, I've worked with the apprenticeship director of the state of Connecticut to get that all in place. And they were very, cooperative with that, ironing out all the details with it. And, it took a little bit of time, but it is moving forward. Just getting involvement from the contractors now and kind of coming up with, how many people do you need and when do you need them is kind of what I'm, waiting on now to start that,
There's a couple pieces. One, the work needs to execute. And we graduated 7 students who want to work and live in Boston and that area. And there's plenty of great companies in this room and at this conference that will hire these students outside of Massachusetts right now. And we see work happening in New York and we're seeing these pieces, but it's getting past our feasibility side and into execution with this workforce. The second big piece is we still have an identity crisis as an industry from high temp geothermal, which ironically I was just at GEOED working on the task force for energy production on the rigs, tooling, and equipment side, and they're using 300 degrees. And so when we look at DOE and talk about where that break is from low temp to high temp, 300 degrees Celsius is still low temp. So our states look at this, and perfect example is Texas. Texas went, whoa, we haven't drilled a geothermal well since 2001. And we went, did you see Whisper Valley? Did you guys see what's going on? And people think we're drilling oil and gas wells still. You know, Bard College had to put up a sheet on the side of the fence that said, "I assure you, we are not fracking." So we have that. And then the final piece to that in regulation and policymaking is a water well license is a perfect thing to have, but we need to have some definition into geothermal licensing for our industry that has some cohesion, that respects the environment, make sure we don't contaminate aquifers, but at the same time, if we're gonna scale companies, many states have policies in place where you're going to go work as a driller for another company until you get your 10 wells or your 2 years of experience in, and then you can go sit for the test. We got 5 years and 2 months to hit 2030 goals, and New York right now could eat every bit of our capacity in this country to drill. So what do we do about Chicago and Massachusetts and Colorado and California on top of that?
So I'm active in a number of states, and increasingly, a lot of the more forward-thinking states that really have active building decarbonization strategies are certainly deploying amounts of state funding or creating programs geared towards workforce. A lot of that money is going towards building out, building an air source heat pump workforce, which is great in a lot of ways. We're going to need a lot of air source heat pumps as well, but I think it behooves us as an industry to get a seat at the table. So much of my job is going to various forums and saying, geothermal heat pumps are a thing too. Like, you have to remember us. And they're like, oh yeah, that's the geothermal guy again. But that's how you just got to be persistent. You've got to plug in. You've got to get a seat at the table. And it's hard for us to be everywhere at once, but we kind of need to be everywhere at once. And that's why the GMCC is a bit of a clearinghouse where we get on the line once a month and we talk about funding opportunities. Did we hear about this one? There, DOE, and I think Alexis from GTO, when she talks during this conference, is going to talk about a recently unveiled workforce program coming from the feds. Increasingly, the feds are recognizing workforce shortages. So I think it's both at the state and the federal level, making sure that we're tuned into those streams and showing up and pursuing them is going to be essential.
And I would just add a little bit. We learned so much from that pilot driller tutorial, like just so much to learn, so many challenges. And I think some of those challenges, are just a question of scale. Like, it's very hard. Part of the point of the Center of Excellence is just like trying to get enough money, people, time, resources together to stand up something that can actually work. Because just something like insurance can kill a program dead. If you don't have a rig, you don't have anything like the collateral to get the insurance you need to train people on that rig. And that is one of just a whole succession of kind of chicken and egg problems that really bedevil a lot of this like training process. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for states, sort of forward-looking states, that really want to have a local industry, to Brock's point about, listen, I get it that a lot of drillers spend a lot of their time, I know Brock does, like traveling the country, but it would be great to be able to have a local industry as well.
I have one other thing to add to that, just based off of challenges that we've been seeing with clients, in terms of meeting prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, and either some non-union shops or like mom and pop shops getting that formal certified apprenticeship program up and running, and so that they will qualify under the IRA. Typically what we've seen is they have apprentices, but not, the state certified program. And so they have the training, and from a specific client that I'm thinking of, it took them just under a year to get a program up and running, talking with the Department of Labor and getting their program certified so that they will meet this requirement. So.
Another question over here. Chris, who has the microphone? Sorry to call you out.
Hello. Richard Draper from Kenza Heat Pumps in the UK. Really interesting hearing the insights from the US market because it's very similar in the UK. I think we have this sort of chicken and egg issue in the UK in that to date, the drilling training has all been on-site training. You know, it's pretty informal training, and the issue is that without the pipeline of work coming through, it's hard to bring a workforce through. So, you know, drillers get taken on and then they get released another 6 months later. And so you talk about, and we have the same projections that, you know, within Kenza itself, within the next 3 years, based on the sort of pipeline that work we've got, we would use up all of the UK's trained drilling capacity. But the challenge is, how do we bring the workforce on it? And this is where apprenticeships, I think, potentially fall down, not knowing it enough, because it's great providing apprenticeships for on-work training, but if you don't have the work, even if that's subsidised, it doesn't matter. So it's really interesting to hear what you're saying about setting up a separate academy where you can maybe move the training away from it actually being on site. Just keen to get your views on that and how you unlock it. It seems the key is potentially to have that, you know, those chunks of state or federal funding that you can set up those academies to maybe disaggregate the two from each other.
So our traditional concept for training is broken when it comes to drilling, and many of these tribal self-taught, we see this from great masons. Try to get your chimney fixed on an old house these days, or there's so many pieces, but the drilling community is big when it comes to a scope of all that we can do. We lump ourselves back into that same bucket, and the beauty about ground source geothermal drilling is there's repetition. So if we can do 80 hours on roles and responsibilities and safety and being able to be present on site, watching that assistant driller or that driller, we can develop people making good choices. But the really sexy part is the fact that I'm not drilling one hole and leaving, which I worked for Suez and Veolia as director of wells for municipal water, right? Like, that's complex. We're talking about drilling 500-foot holes, and then at a residential, 4 or 5 of them, on a commercial scale, big. So if we could get a COE stood up and we start looking at apprenticeships, there could be drilling labs. Like, we can put somebody on a site that the geology may change a little bit, but it's not going to change at the stakes that I drill a water well here today, and next, 3 days from now, I'm upstate New York. And so if we give them the right skills in the fundamentals in science and critical thinking and being able to operate safely, then watching that muscle memory and getting better at drilling can be done. To that same point, we have a wide range of designs for bore fields right now. Our training tutorial, I wanted to get the students on a 400-foot hole that we could watch be completed in one day, because we have looked at capacity and decided we like 800-foot. We like these bougie designer holes. And if we're going to scale this market and meet our 2030 goals, there's places where that simpler hole can be done. And for me, the biggest piece was, if I'm going to teach football, I want to do 4 downs and a touchdown. I don't want to play 4 quarters. And doing an 850-foot hole takes a precision crew that's respecting those loops and that rig and every piece of it. And when you're bringing new people on site, that's a big lift. And so we have to identify the right jobs once we get these people comfortable, that they want to be able to execute on something that's simple.
Greg, anyone else?
I'm a drilling company in New York. I'm a union firm.
Mike coming.
I don't need a mic, but and it's been a difficult 25 years of getting people, okay? And it's union, and there's no help from union. I'm in New York. How many people in the apprenticeship program in Connecticut that you have? How many guys?
We have 100 right now.
100 guys for drilling?
Not for drilling only.
So what I'm saying is and to Brock, your point, it's generational. You're not going to, there's going to be ups and downs in the construction industry. There's guys laid off all the time for highway, heavy construction, drilling for foundations. But those guys are, you know, they're on, they're off, and it's over years and years. We don't have time for that, and you can't train a driller to drill 300-foot holes, 500-foot holes in a year. It's not going to happen.
Well,
So,
and in our program, we train them to be well-rounded equipment operators, and they go where the industry needs them. So you could be running a skid steer today and running a crane tomorrow. In my career, we did that.
but running a skid steer and a crane, I don't want to, you know, poo-poo on your stuff, but it's way different than running a drill rig. And also, it's just, it's water well industry. I mean, Brock, you know, this is the same mantra for 25 years that I've been doing this, of getting water well guys. And the reason why there's only mom and pops is because they're not going to let some kid run $1 million rig, you know, and it's just the way it is. I mean, there's some big companies out there, but for the most part, it's, and you go in the next room and they're complaining that the boreholes cost too much money and we got to get the drilling costs down. So, you know, I don't know what to say.
Question in the back over there.
Stan is a great industry advocate. I will say one thing, if we get back to embracing the science and fundamentals of drilling, because there's individuals here that have went, Brock, you've turned this project into too much science. It's bullshit. It's the fact that if I know what my equipment's capabilities and limitations are, and I match that to the geology that I'm in, I can get an operator into being a okay driller, and then we can go. And I want to hear what Stan's got to say, but Robert Meyer, co-founder of the Geothermal Drillers Association's in the back of the room, and he talked with the students, and he said, listen, I can hire lever pullers or I can hire drillers, you know, and it's that milestone. One of our problems has been, how long do I have to shovel the mud pit before I finally get to stand up on the platform and get to run the top head or trip out or all of those things? We could do a better job of getting the milestones and letting them level up.
Well, like you said, 300-foot holes and 800-foot holes, everybody thinks it's the same. It's not. You can do
Agreed.
300-foot boreholes, feel faster than a guy running 48.
Stan? Oh, Kate?
Hey, I'm Kate. I work with Stan at Geosource Energy.
We want to hear from Stan. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
You have to show up to his talk tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 about angled drilling. It's great to hear everyone thinking about training and certification and apprenticeship. One thing that we're struggling with or dealing with is the varying requirements by state and sometimes by county within that state for projects, which makes it fairly complex to bid in kind of a broad swath of area because you're dealing with kind of roadblocks every single time you go into a different bid depending on what neighborhood it's in. From the kind of policy level, are there any discussions going on about perhaps standardizing or having some kind of federal level accreditation for drillers across the country that would make it potentially easier for drilling contractors to come up and provide services across the U.S.?
Well, certainly want to hear Brock's thoughts on this. I've not heard, and I would be quite surprised if there was a federal specification or requirement licensing for drillers nationally. But what you're speaking to, the patchwork, is a real problem. I know, I hear from drillers all the time, crossing boundaries it's sometimes not worth the hassle. And Brock and I have talked about this a good deal. My dream in the coming months and years is to really kind of come up with a one-size-fits-all that works across multiple jurisdictions. So, and to have GeoExchange, the GDA, NGWA, IGSPA, and other water well professionals, groundwater professionals, all have a consensus-based approach about the best way to do it. I know that there's different geologies and different sort of prerequisites from state to state, but we can, if we work together and build consensus, come up with best practices that can be seeded in some key states and then taken elsewhere. And we're starting to see some of this stuff. I mean, it's interesting how many states are right now undergoing revision of their requirements, like in Colorado, where I'm quite cautiously optimistic about the outcome of that because there's already such strong collaboration between the state and the drilling industry. So, Brock, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I thought your dream was to be a driller. I thought you were going to be our first student. Okay. We do need more collaboration amongst states, but we've never seen it in the water well industry or the environmental, or as we look at regulations. And let's face it, you get farther west of the Mississippi and we got all sorts of water crisis stuff going on. And we saw President Biden come out with a strategic water reserve definition this year, well, in December, and now it's continued. So groundwater's 100% on the radar. And I think that's what drives a lot of our licensing issues. And since you opened this door, I'm going to challenge the industry. We can't just continue to run big air and produce water out of the ground the way we're doing it. It's going to catch up with us, where somebody's going to say, as a hydrogeologist, they're going to say it takes 1,000 years to replace that water that came out of the ground at 600 feet, and we're depleting it. So from the Clean Water Act to everything happening there, it's going to be hard to do. But could New England have a better agreement? Could there be reciprocity? Could the western states, the Colorado River Compact states, do that? Absolutely. And it's getting our groundwater associations and our geothermal associations and our geotechnical and environmental folks involved. I'd love to see test wells, and I know we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but test holes that is a third-party engineering firm and drilling company. No different when I bid a municipal water well, somebody else has already came in and done a test hole that I can look at, and I can 100% know that it's been stamped and factual. So.
Maybe time for one quick question before we break.
How's it going? Local 7, Scott and Eide, Albany, New York, we're the plumbers and pipe fitters. If you guys have like a database or anybody that is a union well driller that wants to come to Albany, New York or upstate New York, we could really use them to work with our contractors.
Sounds like maybe you should be speaking to people during the happy hour. I don't know if anyone, Brock, anyone has a...
The drilling industry is a great community, and it's not that big. So there are people out there that are willing, that are ready and enabled. And what I've seen here on the East Coast has been awesome with what the operators want to do. And the 150 with Dave Bowers in Chicago, they have one of the strongest drilling communities that's good, competent, long legacy of drillers coming in. But at the end of the day, if you watch the Framingham photos and you see the guy that's running the rig on a remote, and then you see the guy that's in the mini excavator, handing the rods, I know plenty of individuals that go, I just want to sit in the cab and run, hand the rods versus be in the mud. And so, that's always going to be the question: is how do we get everybody out of the line of fire in drilling, and we make it so that it's, more user friendly.
And with that, we're going to wind up. Let's have a round of applause for our great panel. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.